Good afternoon and welcome to the Introduction to Personal Finance webinar. My name is Tom. I work on the planning side here at Carrington and I've just completed the diploma in financial planning. And I'll be joined today by my colleague Tommy, who works on the planning and investment side, and he's completed the first two of his diploma exams. So you're in good hands today. So the aim of today is to give you guys just some tips and guidance on managing your money when starting your first job or at university. If you've got any questions at all, if you want to pop them in the Q&A box, either the top right or the bottom, and we'll try and get around to as many as we can at the end. So what is personal finance? Personal finance in its simplest sense is how you manage your money. And it can cover a wide variety of things such as budgeting, saving, insurance, mortgages, investing, a whole variety of things. And we'll touch on a couple of these today. But why is it so important? Well, when you have a good idea of your financial situation, it makes it much easier to budget, save, and achieve your financial goals, whether that's taking a year out and going traveling, or saving for your first car or first home, whatever it may be. If you have a good idea of your financial situation, it makes things much easier. So first off, I'll be covering a few things about personal finance in your first job, talking about bank accounts, understanding your payslip, student loans, and then Tommy's going to talk about savings, ISAs, LISAs, and investing, and also financial technology, also known as fintech, and how that can help you save, budget, and invest. Just bear in mind that investing does come with risk, and we'll talk about this later on. So firstly, bank accounts. Almost the very basic thing for personal finance is ensuring that you have a good bank account and one that works for you. So for those of you who are thinking of going to university soon, or for those of you who are at university, it's worth getting a student bank account, as the high street banks are very keen to get you on as customers, and so offering very good introductory rates and deals, such as free rail cards. Appreciate that's not much used at the moment, discount codes for shops, or interest-free overdrafts. But bear in mind, though, that interest-free overdraft will have to be paid back at some point. You might get a 1 to 2 year grace period after you graduate, but it will need to be paid back. So once you've graduated, if you've already had a student bank account, you're more than likely to be rolled over to the graduate bank account of that same bank. However, at this point, it's probably a good idea to shop around and see if there's a better deal that you can get. Graduate accounts often have insurance benefits or higher interest savings accounts for their customers. And also it gets you into the good habit of shopping around for a bank account every couple of years and changing. With the current account switch guarantee, it's very easy to do. You find your new bank account, enter your details, enter the details of your old bank, and they sort everything for you, transferring your balance, your payees, direct debits, standing orders, everything. And then for 2 years after you've opened the new bank account, anything that's sent to the old bank account gets automatically redirected to the new bank account, and that person gets a notification to say that they've changed their bank account. So it's a really good habit to get into every few years, changing your bank account and seeing there's a better deal that you could get. So credit cards. So credit cards are a really good way of building up a long history of good credit, which is really useful for not only the major things like a mortgage or car finance, but also things like mobile phone contracts or internet contracts. They really like to see a good credit score, and having a good one can make things a lot easier. So getting a credit card, using it a small amount each month, and make sure you pay it off each month will help you build up that credit score. And one way to check is using one of the many apps that are available online. So Money Supermarket, Experian, there's a whole host of them. And if your credit score isn't as good as it should be, then they'll offer tips and guidance on how you can improve it. So you've got your first job, you're getting paid, hopefully, and you get a payslip. It looks like this. Quite scary, lots of things that you don't understand. That's what I certainly felt when I started work. So I thought I'd give you a quick rundown of what to look for in a payslip. So on the middle left, you've got payments, so salary, bonus, commission, expenses, perhaps overtime. That's what you're expecting to be paid by your employer. On the right of that, you'll see deductions. So PAY tax, that's income tax, national insurance, healthcare. So perhaps if your employer provides you with a work-based benefit that you're expected to contribute a small amount to, that's shown there. Student loan, we'll come on to that later. EE and ER pension. So EE is employee and ER is employer pension. So if you're an eligible job holder, your employer should auto enroll you into a workplace pension scheme, and they will make a contribution of a percentage of your salary on top of your salary to that pension scheme. And you will also make a pension contribution to that pension as well. But this money is effectively tax-free because it comes gross out of your gross salary. And it's a really good way of building up savings early. Underneath that, you'll see year to date. So that's a running total of what you paid in income tax, national insurance, and what both you and your employer have paid into your pension. Underneath that, you've got net pay. So that's what's actually going into your bank. And it's a really good way, really good idea to ensure that that is what is shown in your bank statement. So we get quite a lot of questions about student loans. So I thought I'd just cover off how they're treated once you graduate. So the interest. The interest starts immediately. As soon as you get that text from Student Finance England saying the money is going to be in your account, that's when interest starts. And it starts at RPI plus 3%. And RPI is the retail price index, which is a measure of inflation used by the government. So once you graduate, the interest rate depends on how much you're earning. So for the lower earners, it's just RPI. And then there's a sliding scale up to RPI plus 3% for those higher earners. I think it's about 47,000. The interest that you pay on the loan and what you pay back of the loan, they're separate. So you only pay back 9% whatever you earn over the threshold income, which is 26,575. And that's rising next year to 27,570. So you only pay back that amount. And the good news is it's not treated by a loan or mortgage company as a debt, and it won't show up in your credit score. So it won't show up in one of those apps that we spoke about earlier. The only way it's treated is as an expenditure. As we'll see in the next slide, that won't be a huge burden for you. And it's wiped after 30 years, regardless if you've paid £30 or 30,000. So here's a couple of examples of student loan repayment. So as you can see, up to 26,000, you don't pay anything. And then as you start to earn more, you pay a little bit more. But even as you're earning 40,000, you only pay back £100 a month, which is of your monthly salary is about 3%. So it's not a huge burden. And personally, I see it as more of a graduate tax. For me, being able to go to university and pay nothing up front, I pay a small amount each month from my paycheck that I don't even see. So that's just a way of looking at it, really. So that's it for me. Now, Tommy will talk about savings.
Yeah, cheers, Tom, and thanks for that. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about savings and investing, and then we're going to go on to talk about also the different accounts and vehicles you can use in saving. But I think first talking about saving investing more generally is quite important because I think when you're young, it's not that much of a consideration. But as you perhaps go to uni and leave uni, you start having bigger financial goals, whether that's at uni and you're saving for a holiday, or if you've left uni and you're in professional work and you're thinking about like a house deposit or perhaps a down payment on a car or rental deposit, for example, you start having these larger financial commitments which you need to put money aside for. And saving and investing is simply the best way to do that. And more specifically, focusing on investing, it's a great way to grow your wealth over the long term and to get a better return because in today's market, I think most savings accounts earn you about 0.1% interest, or which essentially a rate of return of 0.1%, which is pretty meager. So if you're investing your money in financial markets, you're hoping for a better return. But of course, with that comes the added level of risk. And I think also, investing is important to focus on tackling inflation. Tom mentioned it earlier, and those of you who aren't fully aware, inflation is essentially the increase in cost of goods over the period of time. So, as Tom said, if you have an inflation rate of, for example, 3%, a kind of good or service that you would buy today in 1 year will cost 3% more, and it essentially erodes the value of your money over time. And investing is a way to combat that, because if you generate a greater return on your investments, you're beating the rate of inflation, and so your money is actually growing in real terms. So that's a significant benefit of investing. But also, some of you guys might have heard of before is compounding returns or compound interest. And this is essentially the idea that you earn interest on top of interest, or a return on top of a return. And it's a really powerful way to grow your money over the long period. So if you're saving for something in 10 years, for example, or perhaps you're thinking even longer than that, 20, 30 years, compounding interest is a great way to benefit from that. And as you can see in the graph here, it might look a bit complicated. I'll try and break it down for you. But essentially, you've got kind of two periods. You've got Emma who starts saving at 25, and you've got Joe who starts saving at 35. And the two thicker lines down the bottom show an investment of £5,000 saved until 65 and earning 7% a year. And that's great. Turning £5,000 into £70,000 or £30,000 is pretty good. But the two higher lines, the two dotted lines, pretty much highlight the power of compounding interest and return, but also the power of contributing to an investment and a saving over the long term. I mean, turning £5,000 to over £330,000 is pretty good. But obviously it takes time, and I think that's one of the main benefits of saving and investing, is that you're thinking about it over a longer period. But as you can see there, if you contribute to an investment over 40 years, you're going to have a large sum of money. So that's essentially the power of compounding returns. And I think Albert Einstein once, called it the eighth wonder of the world because of its power and the benefit it brings to us as investors. So that's a little bit about saving investing. And I thought I'd now come on to, the types of vehicles and accounts that we can use, to make the most of our saving investing. So we're going to tackle a little bit about what an ISA is, the different kinds of them, and also the main benefits. So essentially, there are four ISAs you can open each tax year, and these are a cash ISA, a stocks and shares ISA, a lifetime ISA, and an innovative finance ISA. We're going to focus on the stocks and shares ISA and the lifetime ISA, but I thought I'd just briefly talk about the other two. So cash ISA is simply, it's a basic savings account. It will earn you, pretty bad savings rate at the moment. But it's a way to access your money easily and safely. Likewise, another is an innovative finance ISA, slightly different and slightly more niche, but this allows you to invest in something called peer-to-peer lending. And essentially, you're loaning out your money to generate a return. Again, quite niche, and actually, I haven't actually come across innovative finance ISA that often because it is slightly more niche, as I said. But the main benefits of saving and investing in an ISA is essentially that you get a £20,000 allowance tax-free each year, and this kind of renews every tax year. So this tax year you can save 20,000. The next one you can as well, and also you have a number of tax benefits, including the fact that you don't pay any tax on interest. As you can see here, the next one and the most kind of common ISA that we talk about is a stocks and shares ISA, and this is essentially a way to invest the money that you contribute in that account. So you still have that annual tax allowance of £20,000, but you're also not taxed on any interest earned or any capital gains. So capital gains quickly is a gain that you make on an investment. So for example, if you buy shares in a company that are worth £1,000 today and they're worth £1,500 in a year's time, that £500 is the gain, and that is something you would typically be taxed on. However, if you hold those investments within the stocks and shares ISA, you are not taxed on those. Likewise, you're not taxed on any dividends earned. Dividends are a payment that you get for owning a share in a company. It's essentially a reward the company are giving you for investing with them. And likewise, you're not taxed on those either. And if you hold these investments in a general investment account, over the long period, as you can imagine, you can make serious gains. Turning, as we saw before, turning £5,000 to £300,000. That's pretty significant gain, and you would actually lose quite a lot of that on tax if you weren't protected by one of these kind of savings accounts. So the tax benefits are there to be seen. The next one is a lifetime ISA. So this is slightly different to a stocks and shares ISA, because it's essentially an account for two main savings goals. So you have the £4,000 tax-free. That's the maximum you can contribute. But any money you save into a ISA, the government gives you a 25% bonus. So if you contribute the full £4,000 per year, the government will grant you £1,000 tax-free. And that's essentially to incentivize you for these two savings goals, which are a deposit as a first-time buyer, but also in retirement. So if you if you choose to save and invest in the lifetime ISA, you get this bonus, but you can only withdraw them for those two reasons. And if you withdraw them for anything else, for example, if you need to pay to repair your car, you will lose that bonus. So this is a great account for you to use. One, because you get free money from the government, and who doesn't like free money? But also because it's a way to save for a significant goal, like a house deposit. On top of that, you can also invest the money you contribute through a stocks and shares lifetime ISA. Now, I know that's quite a mouthful, but essentially it allows you to invest the money that you've deposited in that account, just like a regular stocks and shares ISA. It's important to note, though, that you only get the bonus on what you contribute. So again, let's say in 1 year you contribute £4,000, but through your investments you now have £4,500. You will only get the bonus on the £4,000 and not the gain you've made. That's just something to clarify. But again, as I said, it's free money, so it's really good. And even if you already have like a Help to Buy ISA, for example, which is another a now closed account, which allows you to save for a first-time deposit, you can just use this money for retirement, and really, if you're thinking really long-term. But yeah, so those are the main ISAs. But the one thing I want to clarify is this £20,000 tax allowance, because I think it's something that people often get confused by. You can open any one of those ISA accounts each year. You could open all four if you want, but you can only contribute £20,000 across all four of them. So a good example of this is if you contributed £4,000 to the lifetime ISA, you would only have £16,000 left to contribute across the other three accounts. So what you could do is you could open a lifetime ISA and contribute the £4,000, but you could also have a stocks and shares ISA and contribute the £16,000 there as well. And so, we've kind of looked at the main benefits of opening an ISA and why you should do that. But there are kind of some minimal downsides, I think, to opening an ISA. And the main one is that generally when you open this account, there are fees and charges. And that depends on where you open it, so which bank or institution you open it with. But it does vary, and that's why, as Tom said earlier, it doesn't pay to be loyal, and it's always good to shop around for other services. So I have an ISA with HSBC, which I don't have any charges on because I already have other accounts with them. But another ISA I've opened previously is with Hargreaves Lansdown, which is another financial institution, and they charge 0.5% per year on any investments you make. I think it sounds quite minimal, 0.45%, but over the long term, that can kind of reduce your returns. So it is something to think about, and it is good to shop around and see what's out there. But one thing that's becoming kind of more and more prominent is the rise of technology and the rise of low cost and easy to use ISAs and accounts. And this is kind of what we're going to kind of talk about, is the rise of technology and how kind of fintech can really benefit you. So, I've been using these sorts of apps for quite a while now, and they all have their pros and their cons. But I think kind of as more and more providers come out with technology and companies become more innovative, there are kind of more ways to save and invest. And I think one of the most important things about technology for me personally is the idea that managing your finances shouldn't be boring. I know traditionally managing your money isn't the most exciting thing, but at least with the rise of technology, it's becoming more accessible to us. We can do it on our phones, we can do it super quickly. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been into a bank branch for probably like a year now, 18 months, because I can do it all on my phone and it's all accessible there. And I think, with the rise of technology, there's more and more availability to everyone. And I think also what's really beneficial about them is that you can use these apps depending on how much involvement you want to have and how hands-on you want to be with your personal finances. So as you can see on the slide, we've got a couple of examples of some apps and developers that have created really good kind of mobile offerings. So you've got Monzo, which is a mobile-only bank. You've got Moneybox, which is sort of an all-in-one service, and you've got Trading 212, which is an investing platform. And the beauty with these sorts of apps is, as I said, if you want to if you're not that interested in your personal finances, but you want to think about starting to manage them, you can use a service like Moneybox, which will, open an account for you. You can open ISAs, you can open a pension, but also it also kind of gives you the ability to kind of have a hands-off approach when you're thinking about saving and investing. So I've used Moneybox before, and they essentially have investing strategies. And you pick a strategy, for example, a sustainable strategy or a kind of cautious strategy, and that's it. And that's kind of what happens. And they do the work for you. On the other hand, an app like Trading 212, which is an investing platform, allows you to handpick the investments you want to make. So if you've done a fair amount of research, or if you kind of have an idea about perhaps a sector or a company that you think is going to perform well in the long run, you can handpick and select that company and that investment. And again, it just gives you that kind of hands-on approach so if you are more interested, you can have more control. And kind of that's a great way to kind of decide which service you want to use, which app you use, is by how much involvement you want to have. But there are a number of other benefits that come with using technology and using these sorts of apps that make managing your finances a lot easier. So as I said, I use Monzo mostly for its expense tracking. So you can track your spending. You can see exactly what you're spending on each week, and it breaks it down into like really easy categories. And so that's a great way to budget. And if you have a look at that every month, you get an idea of what you're spending too much on, or perhaps what you could spend more on. Likewise, you have this. I haven't used the Monzo Pots before, but it's another service which essentially allows you to allocate money based on what you're saving for, and you can kind of lock it away for maybe a year or two, and it's really easy to use, as I said, all on the mobile phone. Another example is Moneybox. And so when you save and spend with Moneybox, they top up anything you've spent, and that money is then allocated to a savings account or an investment account. So let's say if I spent £1.50 on a coffee, the extra 50p is rounded up and put into my savings account. And that's kind of it doesn't seem like, 50p for every bit you spend doesn't seem like that much. But when you're spending every day, it does add up. And it adds up without you having to have that much control and do too much. So, after a month or so, you could have saved up, 30 or 40 pounds, which, again, it might not seem like a lot of money, but if you're doing that every week, every month, for 5-10 years, you will build up a significant sum of money. So I think kind of when it comes to technology, I would definitely say embrace it. But I understand why people perhaps are a bit cautious when it comes to apps. Most of these guys have only been around for 5, perhaps 10 years max. And so there is perhaps a bit of caution, as I said, but all these guys, all these apps are safe. They're regulated by the FCA, and they also are protected by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, which essentially means that if any of these companies defaulted or went bankrupt, your money would be protected up to £85,000. So they are safe. They are really well regulated. So I do think they're really beneficial. And as I said, as it says down there, technology is your friend. And I do think as the years go on, technology is going to get smarter, and it's going to be able to benefit you a lot more. So I would always say embrace technology. And these are a few examples of why. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you guys all so much for listening. Of course, if you guys have any questions, do let us know. And just again, thank you for taking the time out to listen.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening. So, Tommy, we've got one question here for you. So I've been gifted a small amount of money. Where do you think I should save or invest this?
Okay. Trying to not give a too wishy-washy answer. I think kind of when you do have a sum of money set aside, I think it's obviously very much down to what you're comfortable with doing with it. I think if you're saving for it, say for something next summer or next year, I would definitely say keep it in cash or keep it in a savings account, because you don't really know what could happen in a year's time. So if that money is locked up in investments, it might be difficult to withdraw, and so you might have some issues with that. If you, again, so for another example, if you are thinking maybe keeping it locked away for a longer period of time, then definitely investing it is a good way of doing that. Selecting specific investments is again tricky, because it completely depends on your situation, the level of risk you're willing to take on, and also the research you've done. So I would definitely say, for a longer period of time, invest it, but spend time researching exactly what you could invest in it. Tom, we've got a question that I reckon would be quite good for you.
Okay.
Is about budgeting. So when did you start budgeting? And do you have a specific tool that you use for budgeting?
Yeah, so I'm like you. I use Monzo as well. I have a normal high street bank that I use as my main, and then my everyday expenditure comes from Monzo. You set an overall budget. You can set individual budgets if you want to for entertainment, eating out, etc. I just set an overall one, and that's a really, really good tool. The little wheel you get that shows whether you're over, under, or on track spending, I think that's really useful. And at the end of the month, I put everything into a pot that you talked about earlier. I also use the roundup feature that Monzo has. I think it's a really, really good tool for budgeting. No, I didn't when I started work, because I had a regular income. I lived in London, so I spent everything I had. But I do now.
Yeah.
So we've got a question on LISAs. I was wondering if there's a limit to the lifetime ISA, and could I put my whole ISA allowance into the LISA? No, so 4,000 is the annual allowance into the LISA, and that does eat into your 20,000. So you can put a maximum of 4,000 into the LISA, which leaves you then 16,000 to put into the rest.
Mm-hmm. Got a question again on RPI. So I know you spoke about it, Tom, earlier, but can you just clarify again what is RPI? And if you could just clarify that.
RPI is the retail price index, and that's it's determined by the increase in prices over the year, and that's set by the Office of National Statistics. That's what they use. There's two measures for inflation. One is CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, and one is RPI, which is the Retail Price Index.
Sure.
I'm not going to get too much more in detail than that.
There's another one on student loans. So it's asking, why does the student loan get wiped after 30 years? And if you're unable to pay it back, does that have a long-term effect on your banking or your finances?
As to why it gets wiped, I don't know that answer, to be honest. That was the deal that was done. That they increased the tuition fees back in 2010 to 9,000, and that was the deal that it would get wiped after 30 years anyway. Mm-hmm. And being unable to pay it back is a tricky one, because if you weren't under the threshold, then you won't pay it back. It's not that you're unable; you won't pay it back. So it's not necessarily an effect, really. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't think it will have a long-term effect.
Yeah, I think, and just building on that, Tom, I think kind of more and more people are starting to look at the student loan repayments as a tax as opposed to a debt, because the majority of students who go to university won't actually pay the full amount back. And there's nothing wrong with that, as Tom said, because it gets wiped. It's not like you have it hanging over your head for the rest of your life. The only thing that will happen, obviously, is that as you begin to earn more, as you get over that threshold, you will see more and more come out of your account. But again, it's because it's continuous for up to 30 years. It does depend a lot on how much you earn. So as Tom said, it doesn't have an effect of you in the long term.
So we've got one for you, I think, which is, you mentioned you used to hold an ISA at Hargreaves Lansdown. Where did you switch to?
Yeah. So I switched to Trading 212, which is the investment platform I mentioned earlier. Because Trading 212 is an investing platform that doesn't have any or associated fees with it. I also like the fact that I had it on my phone, so it was more accessible. And I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with a Hargreaves Lansdown ISA. They have a really wide range of investments you can make. Some of the, they are relatively expensive when you look at it compared to other kind of mobile investing platforms. But it was more just for accessibility. But at the same time, saying that, having your investments on your phone can also be a downside sometimes, because you're more tempted to look at them. And when you're thinking about investing for the long term, you really do want to kind of have that money and kind of leave it and let the investments do their work. The worst thing you can do is constantly dip in and out, withdraw money from your investments, because that will obviously diminish the overall return you get. So that's what I did, and that worked for me. But that might, having your investments on your phone might not work for everyone. So again, it just comes down to what is best for you. And the brilliant thing about technology and ISAs more generally is that they are relatively easily transferable. And so if you do choose to use a service for 6 months or something and you realize you don't enjoy it, it is very easy to switch. And the providers should make it easy for you to switch, because it is their duty. So that's kind of why I switched.
Yeah, it's a good idea to do your research before you go into any of these.
Absolutely.
So, Tommy, another question for you. So, are you ever too young to start investing or saving? And when would be the appropriate time to start? Well, so I'll just take the...
Yeah, you go for
it. So, yes, in essence, because you can't hold assets if you're under 18, but you can have a JISA, a junior ISA, so your parents could open that for you, but you can't hold assets until you're 18. So I guess that's probably the earliest you could start investing for yourself, but you can be invested before that if your parents open a JISA for you. And probably the longer you're invested, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of with an appropriate time to start, I mean, as I touched on before, it does depend a lot on where you are in your life. So if you're at university, for example, you might not have that many things to save for, or such big financial commitments to save for, or so investing might not be appropriate. But saying that, if you do have money, if you are at uni and you do have money left over, then and you kind of don't have any short-term use for it, then by all means, I would say, think about investing it, because you will generate a greater return. And thinking kind of, more longer term, if you're out of university and perhaps starting to save for, larger financial goals, then definitely investing is a good time to start. So again, a slightly wishy-washy answer, I apologize, but it does depend a lot on your scenario. But I think kind of whenever you feel comfortable, or perhaps kind of, whenever kind of a big goal, like you start to think about a big goal, I think that's very often a good time to think about investing.
So any books either of you would recommend regarding investing? Tommy, any books you recommend?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. There are a couple. I mean, so there are a couple that are good for generally understanding personal finance more broadly. And so one book I read recently is called How to Own the World by Andrew Craig. And it basically really easily explains kind of personal finance, some kind of economic terms that are important to understand, and gives you kind of a better understanding of investments. If you want to focus on more investing specific, the one book I always read was it was one of the first ones I read, actually, was Rich Dad Poor Dad by I can never get his name right. I think it's Richard Oyasaki. Really good way to just think about managing money. And also another one is One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch. That's one of my favorite investing books.
Yeah, I mean, I also, for a good idea to go and read is the Money Supermarket. That's a money saving expert. Both very good websites. Investopedia for any sort of terms around investing. There is a lot of jargon around investing, and Investopedia, I think, is a really good website to use to sort of break down that jargon into more plain English if you're looking to go down that route.
I was going to say, Tom, another question on student loans is if you inherit money during the 30 years, is this counted as income for student loan repayments?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm sorry to say, I don't know the answer.
That's a
to
good
that one.
question. Yeah, because I guess if you do receive money and it is counted as income, then the payment for that year would go up. That's a great question. I mean, we will happily get back to you. I
We'll come
appreciate it
back
as
to
anonymous.
that question,
Yeah.
So I think that just about wraps us up. Unless
Yeah.
anybody's got any last minute questions, we will send out a recording of this webinar and we'll have our email addresses on that email.
Mhm.
If you've got any more questions, feel free to email us and we'll try and get back to you as quickly as we can with an answer. So thank you very much for joining.
Cheers, guys.
I hope you found it informative, interesting, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.